It is my honor now to introduce to you all Mr. Bob O'Loughlin. There he is coming here. Bob is the chairman and CEO of Lodging Hospitality Management, which he founded in 1986. His most recent acquisition is the St. Louis Union Station property, which so many of you know they're doing a lot with an aquarium, Ferris wheel, all this stuff. I got to tell you, Bob, it's also where I got engaged. I whispered to my wife, if you know about the architectural mistake there with the arch, you can whisper and across the room somebody can hear it. The place is so cool. That's where I asked my wife to marry me. He is also part of the LHM family, includes Westport Social, the Boundary Restaurant at the Cheshire, the 360 Rooftop Bar, and the entire Westport Plaza complex, among many other things. Bob is engaged in several community and business organizations, including a regional business council, the St. Louis Regional Chamber of Commerce, the St. Louis Sports Commission, and many others, which you'll hear about from Bob. So please join me in giving him a welcome, Mr. Bob O'Loughlin.
Is this on? Yes. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I was a little delayed coming down here. I'll tell you an interesting story. I bought a brand new car, and it really has some get up and go. So it was a nice day out. So I had it up to 60, pushed it to 70, got it up to 80. Next thing I know, I'm going 90, and I look in my rearview mirror, and there's a state trooper behind me. So he pulls me over and get my license out and everything, and he said, boy, it's a beautiful day, it's sunny. Tell you what, if you give me a story I've never heard before, I'll let you go. And so I thought for a minute, and I said, how's this one? 15 years ago, my wife ran away with a state trooper, and I thought you were bringing her back. That got me off, but please don't pass that on to my wife. One of the things that I'm kind of a sports nut. I'll give you, first of all, my background, where I came from, and then what brought me to St. Louis, talk a little bit about the projects we have here and what's going on in our great city, and then open it up for questions. But first of all, as Brett said, we own the Cheshire. And, you know, yesterday was a big day. Go Blues. They're playing really well. And we've been fortunate to have a few people stay with us. One is Jordan Bennington is staying in a hotel. And I don't know if you heard the comment, but he's kind of a quirky guy. Tom Stillman tells me basically he can sit in a room for 2 hours and not say anything to anybody. And I guess that's what goalies have to be pretty focused. But after he was 6-0, the news media asked him a question, what do you attribute to all of your success? And he looked left and he looked right. He goes, I stay at the Cheshire. And so, of course, they didn't know what to say. We didn't know what to say, but we liked the plug. And I ran into the other day Chris Zimmerman's wife, Emily, and she said, you know, Jordan went through a period where, you know, he was losing 3 games. Is everything okay at the Cheshire? And I go, Emily, you're taking this a little bit too far. I mean, it's just a funny comment. But I go back to, I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut, went to the University of Connecticut. And when I got out of school, I just looked ad in the paper for a job. And it happened that there was an assistant controller at the Hartford Hilton. And I said, you know, what the heck, I'll apply for the job. I'd like to get a full set of books under my belt and then decide where I want to go. So I took this job and just fell in love with the business, the hotel business. And I was there for 3 years, kind of worked my way up from accounting. I did front office, I did sales. Anything I could get my hands on, I liked the idea that the general manager of the hotel basically lived in the hotel. He had all his food and beverage. He had a 3,000 square foot suite. Got to play cards with the governor and the mayor every Friday, and I go, it sounds like a pretty cool job. I'd like to end up being a manager. So after 3 years, the guy who was a manager got promoted to go to Cincinnati and brought me along with him. He was really strong in sales. I was good with numbers. And so I went as the number 2 guy. We had an 850-room hotel and a 400-room hotel in Cincinnati, and I just loved it there. And after 3 years working hard in every position, I got promoted to go to Oakland, California as the GM of the hotel. Well, I didn't realize, but Hilton had a policy at the time that all of the managers had to live in the hotel. And at that time, I was married and had kids, and you know, bringing up kids at an airport property wasn't what my wife really wanted to do. And so I was the first GM of Hilton they allowed to live out. And I was doing really well there, and they wanted to promote me, so they invited me to the board of directors meeting in San Francisco. And they had a cocktail reception the night before the board meeting, and we're standing in a cocktail room with Conrad Hilton, Baron Hilton, Donald Douglas of McDonnell Douglas, and the president of Hilton. And the president, just making some conversation, says to my wife, you know, on Bob's next assignment, he's going to have to live in the hotel. And my wife said, he'll be living there without me. Well, it kind of, you know, set the tone, and even though they allowed me to live out, I decided to leave Hilton from the Bay Area, but not before, again, falling in love with the business. While I was out there, the Oakland A's won 3 world championships. I was a sports nut. The Golden State Warriors won an NBA championship, and the Raiders stayed at our hotel every night before the game, and I got to meet a lot of, spent an afternoon with Ronald Reagan before he became president. Got to hire Tom Hanks. He was a bellman at our hotel. That was his first job before he went on to Hollywood fame. And one of the funnier stories, we had World Team Tennis out there, and Tom was in love with Chris Everett. So he wanted to meet her, so he went up to her room, knocked on the door to give her some innocuous message, got her out of the shower, and she was really hot. And he said, I got to meet her anyway. But he drove the bus to and from the airport, and really enjoyed my time out on the West Coast. But I enjoyed so much living in Cincinnati in the Midwest. An opportunity came up after I was 10 years in the business to come to St. Louis and run what was then Stouffer's Hotel downtown. It's now the Millennium, and it's closed, and I had nothing to do with that, by the way. But we grew the company that I worked for from about 8 hotels to 60, and we had them all over the United States, and I supervised 12 out on the West Coast, and really enjoyed the travel, enjoyed taking a look at a hotel, fixing it if there was something wrong with it, and making money. And so after 10 years with them, they wanted me to move to Denver, where the home office was, where I'd be closer to the hotels out on the West Coast and supervise some other hotels. And I said, you know, what the heck, if I'm ever going to do something on my own, now's the time to do it. And that was in 1986, and little did I know how difficult it was to start a business and run a business. But I was pretty cocky, thought I was pretty good at what I did, and so I started Lodging Hospitality Management. That was 33 years ago. Little did I know the tax law changed in 1986, where a lot of real estate was going back to lenders. And what was kind of a negative for anyone that owned property was a positive for me. I knew a gentleman that I played basketball with at the Missouri Athletic Club, and he worked for a bank, and he said, I have this Days Inn in Eureka, would you go down and manage it for us? Well, I had no idea what I would charge, but I said, how about $100,000 a year? He said, done. So we went down with our little company, and at that time we were managing 3 other hotels for lenders. And the first year we tripled the profit, and they were able to sell it and get all of the money out of it, and passed my name on to another lender. Mark Twain Bank was big at that time, and John Dubinsky, who was president, gave me 4 hotels. And before long, I worked for Travelers, worked for Aetna and a myriad of other lenders that were taking real estate back. And all of a sudden, Goldman Sachs bought a portfolio during that recession and basically kept me on, where we managed the two Sheratons for them. I brought the deal of Westport to them, and we managed the two Sheratons and did quite well. And they basically said, go around the country. If you see a hotel, we'll buy it, we'll finance it, we'll give you 10% of the deal. And I appreciated the offer, but I really thought that if we bought some hotels, I could put together a group and then own a bigger share of the hotel. So I passed on that, but continued to do third-party management, which was quite successful, quite lucrative. In addition to it was little or no risk, because you didn't have to put up the capital, you didn't have to deal with the lenders, and you didn't have to renovate the hotels, bring people in and compete. But that was where my heart was always in, to be an entrepreneur and end up buying things. First opportunity I got was I was on the board of the Convention and Visitors Commission in St. Louis. And Ed Trusheim, who is the chairman of the board, said they just had taken a hotel back in Orlando, Florida. It was 200 rooms, and would I like to take a look at it? I went down and spent some time there, and again, being a novice in purchasing hotels, I didn't know what it was worth, but they said they had $5 million in the property, and what would be my offer? And so I thought about it for a couple days, and I called a gentleman back that worked for Ed, and I said, how about $3.6 million, you finance 100% of the deal, and I'll buy the hotel. And he said, I'll call you back in a half hour. And so a half hour later, he called back, he said, you got the deal. And for a moment there, I thought, well, maybe I should have shot a little bit lower on this thing. But anyway, that was my first purchase of a hotel in Orlando, and it turned out to be very successful, so I bought another hotel in Orlando, and that was successful until we had 9/11, where Osama bin Laden said he was going to target Disney, and business would drop. Our business is basically on the economy. If the economy is going good, hotels and hospitality does real well, like a lot of businesses. And if the economy is down, then we struggle a little bit. And I'll tell you in a little bit where we made our most money in purchasing. But I was often doing kind of a combination of buying hotels and doing third-party management for large institutions. And in the mix, the large institutions, namely Goldman Sachs, would say, you did a great job managing it, would you like to buy the hotel from us? In a lot of cases, I would do that. In fact, the deal I brought to Goldman Sachs, which was Westport Plaza, when they decided to sell it, basically, I put in a bid to buy it and was a successful buyer of the property. They also, at the same time, they sold the hotel separate from the rest of the complex, and I tried to bid on that the first time, and basically I bid $50 million, and the person that got it was a friend of mine. He bid $67 million on it, and then 3 years later he flipped the project to $88 million and made a nice profit off of it. And I'll come around to again when I ended up buying it many years later. So I would be very patient, and I would advise anybody that's an entrepreneur getting in a business that you got to have capital, because if you don't have capital, you can't be in business. And Elizabeth, who was before saying in St. Louis on startup companies, the biggest problem they have, and Arch Grants is really helping out on this, is that when you get to a point, you may have enough money to start a business. However, after 2-3 years to grow a business, you definitely need capital, and you need people behind you that have faith in you that the business is going to go good, and so you can go out and continue to flourish. Otherwise, you go out of business. And in our industry, restaurant, hospitality, hotels, a lot of people get in that are undercapitalized and go out of business. So finding and having capital was very paramount. Now, in the tax law change in 1986, they put in the ability to have LLCs, so you could get partnerships put together, and that's how we grew the company through individual LLCs and getting private equity. I generally take myself, after building up all of the fees that we managed, I created a pretty good sum of money, so I would take anywhere from 51% of the deal up to 100% of any of these deals, and then bring in different partners. And what I'd like to do is get individuals that, and I learned this very early, have a partner that I have a great deal of respect for. He has an interesting story. In fact, he and his wife are going to get talked about at the WashU commencement and get a doctor's honorary doctoral degree coming up. And he went to WashU, and he'll turn, I think, 89 years old this Friday. And to kind of put it in perspective, to get tuition to go to WashU, his father, he grew up in DeSoto, Missouri, sold a cow. And so basically took the money from the cow, paid for his tuition, and he wrote his thesis on the IBM computer. And IBM was just coming out with the computer at that time. He went to work for IBM, and then years later, he went all over the country, and as you recall, IBM stood for I've Been Moved, and he ended up in Europe, running all of Europe and Asia, and lived in Napoleon's summer house. And they had an early buyout. So he took the early buyout, and he and another IBMer went to Chicago. They bought a myriad of banks, made a lot of money there, and then started investing in the stock market, real estate, and basically to help out somebody that was his classmate in high school. He owned a little Best Western hotel at the airport in St. Louis. Well, it just turned out I wanted to buy the hotel. We agreed upon a price, and I said, George, why don't you stay in for half of it? So George usually takes about 30% of all of our deals. We ended up buying about 20 hotels together, where I'd take 50, he'd take 30, and it's been very successful. We basically, the three things he taught me, which I still use today, no matter who I'm doing business with, whether I'm hiring somebody that works for me or basically doing business with anybody, and he said the first thing you have to see in a person is honesty. And the person's honest, they pass the first test. If they have high energy and they work hard, because mostly everything in this world today is the person that works hard, goes at it, is going to be successful. Because mostly what we do is common sense, hard work, and being honest. And then the third is intellect. And if somebody has 2 out of the 3, both he and I prefer that somebody is basically very honest and hardworking, and they will be successful. I saw that in him, he saw that in me, and as Elizabeth said earlier, life's too short to take shortcuts. Basically, if you've got integrity and you work hard and you put the deal on the table, over a period of time, you will be successful. And I was at a wealth management for family businesses about 2 years ago, and there was a question asked of all of the people that were there that have been successful and made a lot of money, was one, how many people in the room had a job by the time they were 11 years old? And I think there was about 100 people in the room, and I would say about 100 raised their hand that at 11 years old they went out and had a job and were a go-getter and turned into owning their own businesses. Now, owning your own business is not for everyone. But for those of you that are looking to do that, basically it starts very early. There's no shortcuts. You don't get out of school and all of a sudden you take a six-figure job. Basically, it's a journey. And I always recommend, because I'm on the board of Washington University and St. Louis University, and we have mentor programs in both universities, as does the Regional Business Council. And I love to get people in a room and try to mentor them, because I remember when I started in the hotel business, I worked hard, I knew I was good, and I always wondered, is anybody really going to recognize that, or am I wasting my time here? Should I be going someplace else? Fortunately for me, I had a guy that really liked me and took me to Cincinnati and mentored me. And I tell all of the people that I mentor, whatever business you're going to get into, be passionate about it and love it. And if you work at it and find out that you're not interested in it, get out of it right away. And the best I tell the college students is do internships, because the internship will give you a taste of what that business that you think you want to be in. And the second thing I tell them is find whoever is in that industry, the top 3 to 5 top people in that industry, and go visit them and sit down. And most people that have been successful will take the time to sit down with a young person, because they were in that position before, I know I was, and say, look, I'd like to go to work for you and learn this business, because I think it's something I want to be in. I'm passionate about it. I'll work for you for nothing. And I just want to learn this business. And you'll be surprised the reaction you get from successful people. And I'm talking from Warren Buffett, who's the most down-to-earth person you'd ever want to meet, all the way down to anybody that's in business or whatever you want to do. They'll take the time, they'll sit down, and they would be very impressed with whoever is in there and open up doors. I know I usually give the people that I mentor about 5 names of whatever business in St. Louis that they're interested in, and then I try to open up the doors so they can go talk to them, and then, hey, if the 2 people hook up, then they go from there. So in any event, what brought me to St. Louis was my wife not wanting to live in a hotel and raise our kids, and the story behind that is basically my wife and I grew up next door to each other in Connecticut, and she would either eat at our house or I'd eat at her house. We dated through high school, we got married in college, and then had kids and have had a wonderful life together. And my motto is simple: happy wife, happy life. And so whatever she says on the family front goes, and we're very fortunate to have 3 wonderful kids. We have 4 grandchildren right now, and my ride has been spectacular in St. Louis. Having bought that first hotel down in Orlando, Florida, and then buying the 2 Sheraton hotels were my first big break as far as purchasing. And I bought them from Goldman Sachs, and like I told you earlier, unfortunately somebody outbid me. And what happened was during the next recession we had, and things don't always go good, and you know, our economy has been very strong for a number of years right now, and sooner or later we're going to get a recession, but that's where I made most of my money. We had another recession come along, and about 7 years ago, the rest of the complex out at Westport went up for sale, and I ended up being the successful bidder at $33 million. And if you recall, I lost the bid at 50, somebody paid 67, somebody paid 88 million for it, and I said, what the heck? If I get it for 33 million, it's bound to go up, right? And so it was running 72% occupancy when we bought it 7 years ago, and I was on the board of Variety Club with Dave Stewart who owns Worldwide Technology, and Jim Kavanaugh is on the board of St. Louis University. And Jim is also an investor in our group, and I convinced Dave and Jim to build their world headquarters out on the lake at Westport Plaza, which they did, and we got the office rentals up to 98% occupied from 72, and we're working on finishing off all of the retail. And one of the interesting stories of looking at the retail, we had a 14,000 square foot movie theater, which I'll show you in a minute as we go through some of the slides of what it looks like. And if none of you have been out to Westport Social, it basically was 14,000 square feet. I talked to Wernberg saying, hey, would you come here and show movies? And they basically said, if you put up all of the money and fix it up, we'll come and show the movies. And I said, nah, I was kind of hoping you'd put some money into it. But as it was, I was very interested as I travel around the country with the social clubs that I saw. Punch Bowl Social, where most of them are, Joe Edwards did Flamingo Bowl and that type of thing. And I said, people nowadays want to go out, and they just don't want to go out and sit and drink, or sit and drink and watch TV, but they want to get interactive, they want to do things. So consequently, I said, I like Ballpark Village with the big screen TVs. I like the social clubs, and I said, rather than bowling, which takes up a lot of space, why don't we take games and just have games there and have them for free? So we have 2 bocce ball, 2 shuffleboard, 4 basketball hoops, a dartboard, ping pong room, and the table games out there, and opened it up, never knowing what it would do, but taking a huge risk to see if it's going to work. Well, thank goodness it worked, and it's packed just about every night. Groups like Edward Jones have booked it out when they have 100 to 200 people in for trainees. They look at, everybody's in a room like this for 8 hours and they want to blow off a little steam. They will go over to Westport Social and, I don't care who you are, somebody says, in fact, my son did this to me one night. I was sitting there and he brings over a 21-year-old guy, and people know I haven't touched a hoop in about 4 years or 5 years. And he said, my dad was a pretty good basketball player. I bet he can beat you in a game of 15. And here's this 21-year-old guy that just poured in about 20 in a row. And so, okay, I'm going to take it on, but you got to give me 5 shots to do it. So the guy did, and here I am, way past my prime shooting hoops with this 21-year-old guy. But it turned out to be a big success, and I'll tell you another funny story about it. I took a bunch of my friends out there just to see it after we opened. So we're sitting there, and we have bands on Fridays and Saturdays out there, and so we wanted to listen to one set and then get out of there, because we brought the average age, way out of whack there. And so there was 6 of us sitting at the table, and a young man came up and he said, when you leave, could I have your table? Because it was full. And he seemed like a nice young guy, so I said, sure. And so he went back, and he was with a bachelorette party or a bachelor party. I don't know, there was mixed group out there. And then he came back and he said, do you mind me asking, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I own the place. And he goes, well, that's pretty good. He said, and you're going to give me the table? I said, yes, I am. And he said, can I buy you a bottle of wine? And so I figured, it's time to get even with this young guy. So I said, yeah, I'll have a bottle of Opus. And he had no idea what Opus was, but that goes at a restaurant for about $400 or $500. Well, he found out when he asked the bartender, and I didn't see him till I left, and he said, thank you very much for the table. So, going along in this industry, you get to meet a lot of good people, as I said earlier, and we had a great opportunity when they filmed Up in the Air here, and part of the gig was all of the people stayed at our hotels, with the exception of George Clooney stayed at the Chase. But part of the deal was to play basketball every Sunday with George. And this was in '09, and so it was a real thrill, because I was still playing hoops at that time, that every Sunday we got to go down to St. Louis University, where we had a practice gym, and we played hoops with George and the crew. So we got to know the crew real well. We got to know basically, and I always look at finances and investment, how you film a movie and what goes on. And so I come home after a Sunday get-together, and after the first game, George says, "I'd like to guard Bob." Well, George is all of 5'10", and I'm 6'4", and he's pushing me and shoving me and having a great time. And my wife says, "I'm in love with George Clooney. You're playing basketball with him every Sunday, and I would love to meet him." So the next Sunday, I said to George, I said, "You know, my wife would really like to meet you." And he said, "Well, bring her out off of Schutz Road." If anybody saw the movie, part of the movie, he got $1 million gift certificate for flying all over the world from Sam Elliott, was the pilot. And so I brought my wife out there, and they don't do this for extras, but she got paid a whopping $78 to go get made up and her hair done, and she got to sit behind George Clooney in first class. But as it be, and a stand-in would come in, they'd get the lighting correct, then he'd rush off, George would come in, say his lines, and leave. So she's texting me, she's sitting behind George Clooney about 2 rows, and she doesn't get to meet him. So I went over for lunch. I grabbed George, who's the most down-to-earth guy you'd ever want to meet, and we brought my wife over, and he did about a half hour of Hollywood stories. And as I went back to work, she texted me, she said, "Now I can die happy." So we've become pretty good friends with George, and I visited him several times out in LA before he got married. Now that he's got married, he spends most of his time over in London. You know, through our industry, it's obviously, you can see by the way I talk, I have never had to work a day in my life. It's always been fun, a lot of things going on in our industry, and you meet such incredible people, and you learn their stories. And I could go on, but I don't want to spend time with name dropping of who they are and their stories. But you know, everybody's a regular person. That, like Tom Hanks grows up as a bellman. George Clooney, he basically tells the story that when his father had a show in Cincinnati, and we were actually living in Cincinnati at the time. He was a young man, and every St. Patrick's Day, he had to come out on his father's show as a leprechaun. He said he didn't really enjoy it, but he was on TV, and he got the bug, and he went out to LA, and he had to drive his aunt around Rosemary Clooney, and she treated him like dirt, so he moved out of her house. A couple friends, he allowed him to live in an apartment. One put up $100 to get his picture taken so he could send it around. And it gave him humble beginnings, and he stayed humble ever since. I suggest that people, as Elizabeth said, and she did a wonderful job, by the way, of talking about getting into business and how you interact with people. If you're self and you're regular and you work hard and you're honest, by God, you're going to do some good things. So that brings us to St. Louis, and I'll show you a few of the slides of the projects we've worked on, and we've been very fortunate. I've run probably 60, 65 hotels around the United States, but right now we own 20 in the metropolitan area. I got tired of getting on and off airplanes and going to the West Coast and coming back, you know, and so on and so forth. So we centered around St. Louis, which, by the way, I've lived all over the country, and I love the Midwest. I love Midwest people, and became really good friends with Danny Meyer, who did Shake Shack and has some of the best restaurants in New York, and he'll say he's got 3 reasons for his success, and that's Midwest, Midwest, Midwest. And I think many of the people that I'm astonished that were born and raised in St. Louis, you know, kind of have an attitude like we're not as good as Chicago, we're not as good as this city. And everybody that's moved here, and a lot of sports personalities have moved here from out of state, not grown up here. St. Louis has got some great things going on and great assets, and I'll go into a little more of what's going on in our community and in addition to what we're doing. And I think those that you don't know, I think we'll look back in 5 years from now and be really proud of this city, because I think it's moving in the right direction. So I'll click on some shots here. This is another funny story. This is Union Station, and I bought this and in our lobby, the Grand Hall, which U.S. News has rated one of the 10 most beautiful lobbies in the country 2 years ago. I wanted to do something different. Every time I buy a hotel, my whole goal is to make it unique, different, so we set ourselves apart from the competition. And I loved the idea of the Peabody Hotel that had the ducks that walked through the lobby every day at 5:30 and made it unique, and that place fills up and it gets packed. And this had such a beautiful lobby. I didn't think ducks walking through the lobby would be a good idea, that you wanted to do something very, very classy in it. And so I talked to a bunch of people, talked to the Cordish people who put me on to somebody in Cincinnati, JRA, which is a development company, who put me on to a group called Technomedia out of Orlando. And they said, how about a laser show off the ceiling? And I said, well, that sounds interesting. Have you done one before? So they sent me out to Las Vegas, and Mandalay Bay has a tribute to Michael Jackson. And it's a combination of dancing, singing, Cirque du Soleil people do that, and then they project on the walls and the ceiling Michael Jackson doing the moon dance and so on and so forth. So we did this show, which we show for free every half hour after 5:30 in the evening, and it turned out to be spectacular. It cost me $3 million to do the show. I was really worried because I didn't know, again, whether it was going to be a bomb, but I thought it would be the risk and reward type of deal. And John Maselli, who designed it for us, basically said, I'm going to put it up for a TIA award. And I had no idea what that meant, but it's the Theatrical Entertainment Association, and they go out to Los Angeles every year. And it's like the Academy Awards. You dress up in tuxedos and you go out and you accept these awards. And so I said, what the heck? We ended up winning the awards. So my son and I and my partner went out to LA, and Disney won for Small World. And the guy who wrote that song for Walt Disney performed it and was there. And then Universal won for Harry Potter. And when they announced our award, they said, we'd like to announce the Grand Hall for St. Louis Union Station in the low budget category. So I went up and had to accept the award, and I said, we really appreciate this. And I said, the thing I'm most proud about, I'm in the low budget category. But it turned out really well. We did 56 weddings there last year. It's a spectacular place for weddings. And when we bought it, Marriott was running it, and basically they were doing about $350,000 a year in revenue, and last year we did $4.5 million just out of the lobby. So it's very popular. People love it, and we keep changing the shows. Our most recent show is a tribute to Queen, and it's a pretty nice show. We have one for the Beatles, and my favorite one is they can do the Sistine Chapel with Italian opera in the background, and it's really kind of a cool show. These are some pictures of guest rooms at Union Station, and what we did was we renovated the whole place. I put about $52 million into rehabbing everything. We have 150,000 in meeting and exhibit space. And in our midway, we call it, we did this large 50,000 square foot exhibit hall. And there's very few hotels in the country that have meeting and exhibit space. Usually you have to go to a convention center for it. Well, this has become really popular, and the hotel does extremely well with conventions and meetings. And we decided about 2 years ago to take the clock tower and convert that. Originally, when Union Station was the largest train station in the world, had 28 train companies in there, and they had their offices up there. Well, we converted them to guest rooms, and they're really, really neat. And we did transoms, and we did the glass windows, and we have the name of every train company. It turned out 28 guest rooms. We put the 28 original train companies that were in the midway, and they've become our most popular rooms. Some more pictures of the different guest room renovations. You can see how beautiful it is. We put a lot of money in our properties. We try to make it much better than whatever competition we have. Now, this one is moving right into our aquarium, and I'll tell you the story on that. As I said, I had $52 million that we invested in the hotel portion, and there was 120,000 square feet left. And that was the arm that's running from the hotel to the south parking lot that, if you recall, in 1985, when Rouse and Oppenheimer had a food hall, shops and everything, and it was really booming for about 10 years. Well, we know retail doesn't do well almost anywhere. We were talking about Amazon earlier. And so we didn't want to open up retail in a downtown area because that wouldn't go over real well. So we said, what can we do? So I thought about it a long time, and we ended up deciding that we're the largest city that doesn't have an aquarium, and so consequently, let's put something in St. Louis that they've always wanted, that we've never had, and I didn't know anything about aquariums. So I went around the country interviewing different companies and talking to them, and at the end of the day, I said, you know, this is something what we ought to do as a thank you to St. Louis for everything that we've been fortunate to get. And so right now, I'll have invested in Union Station about $190 million. And part of the things going around the country is to say, are we going to open up an aquarium and compete with a lot of free institutions? We have, fortunately, in St. Louis, you take the zoo, which I'm on the board of, the Science Center, the History Museum is all free. Now you got to start charging for it and compete with places that are free. Well, you know, a couple samples we had was City Museum charges $14, and that's packed. They do 1 million people a year. And then we decided to, I said, I want a train station, I ought to have a train. So I went out and bought 8 train cars, and we opened up the Polar Express about 5 years ago. We bought the rights to Warner Brothers for it. And basically, it sold out in 48 hours, and it's sold out every year. And it's just great to see. I come down every year, the families, the grandparents, the parents, the kids are in pajamas. They get on the train, and it's a great story. So I said, yeah, you couple that with the aquarium, and we might have something going here. So we've researched it, and this, basically, you can see in the top left there, that's one of the rooms you'll go into after you purchase your ticket. And that clock is actually the largest tank. There's actual fish behind it. And that clock will go around, and you stay in there, and then we'll have the projection show over it. So you'll feel like you're basically in the ocean looking at it. And then every ticket is time-stamped, so it'll say your 8:10 excursion. Then you get on a train, and that train will take you into the Mississippi River, into the ocean, and it'll hold 85 people on one train, 85 on the other, and then you'll get off of the train and you'll be underneath the Mississippi River, which is down here on the right. And we've got, I think, 1,200 different species coming in. And one of the reporters asked me, of all of these fish, how do you get them here? And I said, well, of course, they swim. So we're shipping in from mostly the oceans from the Caribbean, and in Missouri they have a farm that raises all of the catfish and all of the stuff indigenous to the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. We not only want to have this as a museum to show people, but educate people, conservation, education. We have a foundation room that we put together, a 501c3, that basically 1% of all of our sales will go to the foundation. We'll raise money through basically galas and events, and that any child in St. Louis that can't afford to go to the aquarium will go through the foundation for free. And it's kind of a give back to St. Louis, along where we're going to affiliate with WashU, the Botanical Gardens, and the zoo, to basically do conservation and education. And we brought in an education person that works with all of the schools to get the curriculum, so when the school groups come down, we're actually tied in with what they're being taught in school. This is what the south parking lot's going to look like, and to your left you'll see that actually the wheel's going to get here in May. It's a 200-foot Ferris wheel, same size as you would find at Navy Pier, Niagara Falls, Seattle, Atlanta, around the country. It'll have 42 gondolas that'll hold 6 people each. They're heated and air conditioned, and each ride is about a 15 to 20-minute ride going around. It will look into, which I'll get into a minute, the new soccer stadium, which will be west of Union Station. And next to it will be a carousel for children, a miniature golf deal. We've signed a deal up with Anheuser-Busch. They're going to have one train that'll sit there that'll have the Anheuser-Busch story on it, how all refrigerated train cars came out of St. Louis around the country, which really built up their business. And then we're going to tell the story of Dewey Defeats Truman was on track number 36, the history of Union Station, to tell people that we would not have had the World's Fair here in 1904, or the first time Olympics were on U.S. soil was here, because of Union Station, because people from all over the world could go to New York, jump on a train, and come to Union Station. So it's got a rich history, and we want to tell that story. This is another of the train park. We'll have food and beverage. Anheuser-Busch has an area down there. Coca-Cola signed up. We're going to serve their products, and we have a fast food area that we call the 1904 restaurant that you can get in and get chicken fingers, et cetera. Here's Westport Social. I'll hold up on that for a second because I basically told the story. But also at Union Station, we're converting the old Houlihan's restaurant into kind of a yard house that looks out onto the lake. And we have every half hour a fire show that comes out of the lake and water for entertainment. We have a concert area. We'll have concerts in the summertime down there. And we've taken the old Hard Rock and we've converted it into kind of a 50s, 60s, kind of an Ed DeBevick's on steroids, where it'll be an ice cream candy emporium. We're calling it the Soda Fountain. And all of the people will be dressed up like they are in the 50s and 60s and play the music. And it'll be a fun place for families and hopefully adults that are either going to the new soccer stadium or Enterprise Center for events to park their car there and enjoy the Ferris wheel and all of the entertainment before and after games. These are some of the games at Westport Social. Outside we have snook ball, we call it. It's like soccer and pool, and you can kick it in, and then it shows the other games there. That's a shot of Worldwide Technology. And basically, that's the story. We have about 10 minutes left. I could probably go on for another 2 hours because you can see I enjoy what I'm doing. We developed 360 rooftop restaurant for the same purpose. I went to Chicago and saw a rooftop restaurant up there. I said, who designed this? Because whoever designed it was an operator, and it was really well done. Well, it turned out the guy's from Atlanta, and he's done about 150 restaurants, so I called him. He came up. I said, let's do the rooftop bar on steroids, which he did. And 360 has been named, ever since it's been open, one of the top 10 rooftop bars in the world. And so we were very successful with that. We took the Cheshire, converted that. That's done really well. And I've tried to take every project that we've had and make it unique, so when we compete in the marketplace, it's something that people go into. And so say it's not the typical cookie cutter that you see. There's actually something special here. We also, when we hire people, and my son basically runs the day-to-day operation, we studied basically Nordstrom's, Enterprise Car Rental, Southwest Airlines, Four Seasons, of being friendly and giving good service and really going out of your way to make people feel welcome when they come in your hotel. I think that's a big difference. We've all been in department stores where you got to run down a clerk or you don't get information, and it kind of turns us off. Thus, you have Amazon, we'll do it ourselves. But we really go out of our way to get service. So I know I've got about 10 minutes left. Does anybody got any questions as to what we do, what we've done? That's good. I must have did a good job, huh? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Phenomenal. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Bob. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to have people like Bob in St. Louis that are taking a risk and investing in our community and making things happen. So.